Hi, we are going to discuss Chapter 9, which is on the inequalities of race and ethnicity. This is actually, again, one of my favorite chapters. This is an area that I am genuinely interested in myself. I did a lot of research and reading on this topic, and I do it for pleasure too. I like reading about it and learning about it, and it's something that affects all of us. This is the second chapter in the unit on inequality. So I apologize that I'm a little faded out in this video. I had to move my recording space to somewhere else in my house so that way I can record better. Again, I'm going to try and keep these videos quite short so that way hopefully it's easier to download and view them no matter where you're having to do that. So to start off with this chapter, I want you to think about, why is it hard to talk about race? It's a topic that many people shy away from. It's something that people talk about only around people that they're very comfortable with. It's a very hot topic that usually is very charged, emotionally charged. I believe that one of the reasons why it's hard to talk about for most people is there's this assumption that someone has done something wrong, someone feels a sense of blame coming at them or from them or away from them, and it just makes it very difficult for people to enter into this conversation. Well, when we're talking about the inequalities of race and ethnicity, I'm hoping that we can pull away from those senses of blame, those senses of being uncomfortable, and just looking at it for what it is. I don't know if any of you have completed the most recent census. I did mine a few days ago. It's 2020. It's that time again. And the issue of race and ethnicity is always a hot topic when the new census comes out. Because one of the main things that is asked of whenever you are filling out the census is about your cultural background or your race or your ethnicity. I always think it's a little bit confusing whenever you're filling out surveys and it asks, are you white or are you African American? Well, those things are a little bit different. So white is definitely a race category, okay? But African American, that's touching on something else. That's an ethnicity. So those things, they get jumbled up and it leads to people not quite understanding what they are. So most of the presentation that I'm going to do for you is mostly about what are these categories and how did we get to where they are. So there's a little note on the screen saying that norms are culturally and time-based. So in particular, and I've brought this up in a lot of chapters, almost all of them, is that when you're talking about a particular topic, you need to think about what culture and what time are you looking at. So when we're talking about the inequalities of race and ethnicity in this video, it's going to be mostly focused on the United States, okay? You also have to look upon what time frame we're in and what we're thinking about. If we would be talking about the inequalities of race and ethnicity in 1950 or 1865 or 1800, our conversation would be evolving and it would be very different. Things have changed. Remember when we talk about the sociological perspective of conflict theory about how perceptions, ideas change over time. And when one group has a perception that they have less rights than another group, that conflict erupts, such as protests, such as wars, such as legislation in our government systems, and that causes change. So race and ethnicity is an example of that when we're looking at American history. I also want to make note before we leave this slide that notice that the picture I have on here, there's a note at the bottom of where I got that picture. That was not a free image. That was something that I found and I really liked it because Race is about perception. So I'm going to read to you, or I not really read to you. Well, I'm going to read to you. But anyway, on page 239 in your textbook, you'll see that there's a picture. See that picture? Look at the people in the picture. Think about it. What do you notice? What do you see? Okay? What do you notice? What do you see? So keep that in your brain, okay? The caption underneath it says, how many races are represented in this photo? On what basis did you make this determination? So think about the people in that picture. How many races are there? Okay? So I'm going to read to you where it says the significance of race at the bottom of that page. I'm on 239. What is race? A race is a category of people who allegedly, remember that, share certain biologically inherited physical characteristics and that are considered socially important within a society. Biologists have used such physical characteristics as skin color, hair color and texture, facial features, head form, eye color, and height to create a broad racial classifications. The most commonly used system of racial classification has three major racial categories: Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasianoid, along with some unclassified racial categories. Are racial classifications valid? Sociologists now consider racial classifications first developed by 19th century biologists arbitrary and misleading. Why? So why are these things arbitrary and misleading? That means they're not accurate. So those three categories I just read to you based upon hair color, texture, broad racial classifications of eye color, all of that, they're saying this it's misleading and they're arbitrary. So Ashley Montague, a sociologist, refers to race as man's most dangerous myth. Although certain physical features have been associated with particular races, scientists have known for a long time that there's no such thing as a pure race. This long-standing belief has been reinforced recently through DNA studies. Geneticist Kenneth Kidd of Yale University concludes from the DNA samples he investigated that there is a virtual continuum of genetic variation around the world. There's no place where you can draw a line and say there's a major difference on one side of the line from what's on the other side. If one is talking about a distinct, discrete, identifiable population, there's no such thing as race in modern Homo sapiens. So consequently and frequently, features or markers typical of one race show up in other races. For example, some people born into African American families are assumed to be white because their facial features and light skin color. So, what are we talking about? Well, first off, before we get into the distinction between race and ethnicity, we want to talk about what is a minority. So a minority is a group of people within a society that because of their physical or cultural characteristics are singled out from others. So when we're talking about minorities, some people might think that we're talking about a few people. Like minority also has the distinction where you could talk about a small number. But that's not exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about groups of people based upon something in their physical characteristics or in their cultural characteristics, whether it be their religion or different practices that they have, they are singled out from others. So, different forms of minorities is a race, a category of people who allegedly share certain biological characteristics. Society decides what is important and creates these categories. So remember from what we read in this book, race is not real. It's a category of people that we decide, and we being society, we decide what is important, and we make these characteristics based on their biological physical characteristics. Okay, you have this kind of hair, you go in this category. You have this kind of hair, you go in this category. You have this color skin, we're going to put you in this group, this color, this group, this color, this group. But remember from the passage that I read in the book, it's arbitrary. It's based upon who is making that decision. Remember this picture and I asked you how many different races are in that book? Well, how do we know? You know, you might say, oh, there's people with kind of darker skin. They're probably black. And then there's this woman here in the middle. Her skin is kind of medium tone. She's probably a different race. Then there's this guy over here. He's kind of got Asian features. And then these two up here. That's based upon my perception. You could look at this picture and come up with a complete different idea of what you think about what races that they're in. This is why this category isn't 100% real, because again, like the little passage that we read, there is no DNA marker to say this person is white, this person is black. It's all based upon the perception of the person who's looking at it. And me looking at someone could put someone in a completely different category than someone else. So then what is an ethnicity? This is people who have unique characteristics related to culture or nationality that is different than the host culture. So what that means is you most easily see ethnicity whenever you're looking at someone that is different than the dominant culture of the society that you're living in. This is where you may say someone, if we're living here in the St. Louis Metro East area and we say, oh, that person looks Middle Eastern, or that person looks Latino, or that person looks, or they're Jewish. You know, they're different than the dominant categories that we have in our culture. So that's the difference between race and ethnicity. So I also want to mention that in Blackboard, in the course resources folder, there are 4 videos. We are not going to watch those videos as part of as we go along as I'm doing this presentation, because that's just a waste of your time. But I do want to make sure that you go in and click in and watch those 4 videos. The 4 videos are very important and they help to connect the dots. So I am going to pop over to this video so that way you see this one is talking about, well, maybe race, but I'm not going to play the whole video. This is the video. So I want you to go and watch the video on race. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick break here and I'm going to pause this video and then we're going to come back and talk about theories on inequality.